let's get right into it. It's episode number 17 on Joe Jackson Day.
You're listening to the Baseball Book Club.
The first segment today is called Joe Goes Shoeless, and it's out of Joe Posnanski's Why We Love Baseball. And this chapter was kind of like an origin story. You know how all the Marvel movies have the origin stories on how each character gets started? Well, this chapter was like that, and it's about the humble beginnings of Joe Jackson. Born in rural South Carolina near Greenville in the northwestern part of the state, Joe was a homeboy that loved to be in the bush. He was a quiet kid that kept to himself, and, he just wanted to work, and he wanted to play ball, and he really didn't want to do much else.
Yep. Joe Jackson was a shy guy, and I think what Joe Jackson represents, even if you've seen or read 8 Men Out, or the quote, say it ain't so, Joe, like part of the fall from grace, because what everybody knows Shoeless Joe Jackson from is he was a part of the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal. And so, the background of Shoeless Joe Jackson, he was playing for a mill team. And if, everybody had every community had a baseball team back in the early 20th century. Every church had a baseball team. Every manufacturing factory had a baseball team. And so, so Joe Jackson was playing for the Brandon Mill baseball team in his hometown, Greenville, South Carolina, right?
That's it, yeah. And he liked that. And he probably would have been okay if things had always stayed that way, too. But he was way too good for playing baseball with the small-town country folk.
Oh, well, yeah.
And it was only a couple of years later that he bats .408 in the major leagues.
Crazy.
Imagine what he was doing in those Sandlot leagues.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? And that's actually part of the background of the story, too, is that, Joe Jackson being a country kid, illiterate, not, hasn't hit the big city all that much, Yeah,
exactly. That big city life was very overwhelming and foreign to him.
Yeah, and he's just playing for the joy of the game. At least that's how it began. And it was Connie Mack of Philadelphia A's fame.
Connie Mack, who we love.
Yeah, who we love, Connie Mack. He offered $75 a month to get Joe Jackson. Isn't that what it was?
No. It was a $900 contract for the season.
Yeah, that's right. So it was $75 a month that Joe Jackson was being paid to play in the minors, and what it was that he bought a pair of shoes that didn't fit him very well and gave him blisters. And so he asked his manager, hey, I need to sit out tomorrow. These new shoes, they just ripped up my feet. And, of course, in early, hard-ass, early 20th century fashion, the manager told him, well, we're paying you $75 a month to come out here and give it all you got. And now you're going to sit out a day. So Joe Jackson responded by he went out and played the next day, but he took his shoes off and he played the game in socks.
Yeah, I mean, he's nursing blisters on his feet. And, he's not about to make matters worse by wearing the very shoes that caused the blisters in the first place. So he's like, okay, I'll play, but I'm going to have to do it without shoes for a couple of days. And so what does he do? He hits a triple, and here's where the whole thing happens.
That's right, because the taunt from the crowd, or the praise from the crowd is, oh, Joe, you shoeless bastard. And so it becomes Shoeless Joe Jackson.
And, of course, they clean up the language for the sake of the newspapers, and so it's censored down to Shoeless Wonder.
Yeah, you shoeless wonder for print, but everybody knows what it was really said. And, of course, then a legend is born. Joe Jackson, a natural talent at the game. People said he was going to be the next Ty Cobb, said he was faster than Cobb.
Maybe better than Cobb.
Maybe better.
Which really makes it all the more unfortunate that his legacy is almost entirely tied to the 1919 World Series scandal.
It's too bad. Yeah. And had he been able to play out the rest of his career, Definitely, if he hadn't been banned, he would have been a Hall of Famer. I mean, he was a beast.
Oh, certainly. He only played 10 full seasons, but he was well on his way to a Hall of Fame career.
And listen, this is not to defend, any of Joe Jackson's legacy with gamblers or all that, but it's something to be reminded of that's outlined in this chapter is that this is at a time where ball players were not making very much, and Joe Jackson, when he hits a home run, fans are throwing money onto the field, as an accolade to try and, hey, Joe, stay, here's the money that you need. Of course, that didn't happen. And then we get to Connie Mack, offers $900 to play for the A's, and he almost takes him up on it. But Jackson is so nervous, he ends up hopping off the train on the way to Philadelphia and went home. He just had too much anxiety.
Yeah. I think he was 19 years old. He's a small town kid. And keep in mind, Joe Jackson never went to school. So he doesn't know how to read. He doesn't know how to write. And if you're on your way to Philadelphia all by yourself as a 19-year-old kid with no real life experience, and you can't read, and you're probably not very good at communicating well, I could see how it would be overwhelming to be on a train heading away from home and to a place where you know no one. And like you had said, it was too much for him. And so when the train arrives in Philly, he wasn't on it.
Yeah.
But eventually, he does make it there. And his apprehension was well-founded because his fears became a reality. And even his teammates in Philadelphia mocked him for his lack of social skills.
Yep. Yeah, which leads Joe to quote, I'd rather be a star in the Bush Leagues than have to struggle to make it in this big league madness. Like he, kind of has a weak moment where he's like, I'm just going to reject greatness and just go back to being the boy that having fun in the field.
Yep, but in the end, the money that he's able to make playing professional baseball wins out. He gets traded to Cleveland after Connie Mack had enough of him because Joe hadn't reached his full potential in Philadelphia. And with the disaster that he was experiencing with his teammates, he needed a clean slate.
Oh, yeah.
So he's traded to Cleveland, and he breaks out big time.
Yeah.
He bats .408 with 233 hits, including 19 triples. Then it's not long before he realizes he's being underpaid.
Yep. The young man who says he'd rather play in the Bush Leagues eventually comes around to saying, hey, if I don't get paid more, I'll quit the game altogether and go have a career in vaudeville, which probably would have paid him more money than actually being in the majors, at least at that time. But that's how he ends up getting to Chicago.
Yep. He goes to Chicago to play for the White Sox, and the rest is history. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the rest of that story in just a minute when we get over to the Terminology Series segment. But that's the story of Joe Jackson's humble beginnings. That's the story of how Joe Jackson got his famous nickname.
Yep, that being the greatest moment is when he takes his shoes off and runs the bases and gets a triple with his socks on.
Yeah. Leroy, imagine running the bases or playing the outfield in just your socks with those field conditions back in the 1910s.
Good grief. If you thought your shoes were giving you blisters, just wait until you run across that infield gravel with nothing but leggings on.
Yep. Shoeless Joe is not on Poznansky's top 100 list. Neither is he on the Rinaldi 100. But I think had he been able to keep playing in the 1920s, he surely would have cracked the top 100. He missed out on a good 5 or 6 seasons, I would think, as he was forced out of the game at the age of 32. He was a lifetime .356 hitter, which is just insane as a career average, and an OPS plus of 170. So he's 4th all-time in career batting average and 13th all-time in OPS plus. That tracks to be a top 100 guy if he kept playing.
For more segments like this, check out our full episodes on any podcast platform. We are the Baseball Book Club. Thanks for listening.